Once you've done the proportional measuring and you've watched the stuff on the center line, so whenever we draw something symmetrical, there's always a center line when we're drawing something like a bottle or something like a wine glass. It's again the same both sides. But then, I sent you the email, not the email, I sent you the video on the mirroring technique. But now we're actually going to do a drawing with this stuff. How do we put this all together? Well, whenever we're looking, so I've got this little still life that you guys can see over there I'm going to draw. And we want to do our measuring. Now I can't, because of the way I had to set this up, I actually can't see the little still life. You guys can, I can't. So I've got a picture or two of it over here, so I'm going to use that. But so that I'm going to still be using some of that side measure method. But what we're going to do first, we're going to do just what we call a rough sketch. And so a rough sketch is really just for composition. So if let's see, let me just mark right here where we can actually make sure that I've got everything that's in. Okay. So if I'm doing a rough sketch, so this is my piece of paper, let's say. I want to decide where I'm putting stuff on this paper. And that's what a rough sketch really is for. The rough sketch is to help us position stuff. And it's not meant to be anything cute or wonderful, and it's just very basic. So if I was doing the apple and the cube, I'm not even going to worry that it's a cube. Right now it'll just be a rectangle. And then behind that we have like a bottle. Now if I have no inkling of the proportions, I could do some preliminary measurements. But this is just to go ahead and get this put on here so I can ask myself, do I like it? So this is not supposed to be great drawing. This is just supposed to be, very, very, very rough. And once I've done that, well, then I'm going to ask myself, do I like it? And you don't want to put much time into it, because if the answer is no, then you're going to erase this and you're going to reposition it. Like, let's say we said, well, I don't know, maybe I want to zoom in on it. Maybe I want to zoom out. Maybe I want to change the orientation from, this is called a portrait orientation to a landscape or something. Or maybe we want to make it more square. But that's what we want to do, is we want to make those decisions. But I'm going to act like I went ahead and said, okay, this is going to be my drawing. Well, now we actually have to get committed. This little sketch is just, again, for basic positioning. These are just placeholders. But now we have to go, okay, now what am I doing? What am I going to do with this thing? And so the first thing I could do is take a measurement of my, I have to find my increment of measure. And the increment of measure in proportional measuring, I can measure the apple to itself, which is about a 1-to-1, or this little cube to itself. And again, it's going to have a different proportion. It's a 1 to 1 1/3 or something like that. But I need the proportion that everything fits into, so I need an increment of measure. And the increment of measure is just one object that I can use to measure everything else by. And it's similar to like a legend in a map, for those that have ever read a map, and on the bottom it'll say, hey, 1/4 inch equals 500 feet, or half a mile, or a mile and a half, or 5 miles, or whatever it is. That's your increment. Well, we need an increment up here. I could use the apple. You want something that increment doesn't divide into anything more than 5 times. The more times that you measure and use that increment, the more increments there are, the more error there is. So if I had like a little tiny grape down here, that goes in that bottle 15 times, I wouldn't want to use it. That would I'd be way off. And so you don't want anything that divides into anything else more than 5 times at the most. I'm going to use just the height line for this, for my cube here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, is that cube in a front view or is it a corner view? And I've got that it's a front view. I measure the height to the width. And in terms of the height to the width on this, and I've got the width to the left and the width to the right, but I would go ahead and I'd measure it. And I would measure it as, so I could say, hey, what's the, and I'm using the height of it. Not the width, not the depth, we're using the height. And so again, if I'm doing that, I take a measurement of the height, I take a measurement of the left side. So I'm going to go ahead, this will be my line, this will be my height line. Once I lock this in, that's it, I have to use it. If I because it will affect everything. So if I shrink this down to like here, everything will shrink down. I have to remeasure everything. So part of this is to kind of position stuff where I think it might be for the, to get this finished out. But I found out that the width to the right is just under, just under the length of this. So this is the height line. The width is just under that height line. So again, this would be about how much I see of the right side. And I'm going to define this first because this is going to define everything else. If I went ahead and then measured this and then saw how much I see of that side, it's going to be about a third. So if I take this and go, let's see, does that look like a third? That's 1, 2, a little more than a third, 1, 2. That's just over a third. Again, I'll just get this until you go, okay, well, that's about a third. That's a little more. So I'm going to go ahead and go, oh, that's about a third. So I can take this, come over here. That's about a third. And that will now be the right side and the left side. And then I could go, okay, well, let's draw that. Let's draw on my cube. I can also take a measurement of an angle. So you can take your pencil, keep it straight. I guess I can bring this up here. And if I could take this, and of course I could do the same thing out there, but since I can't curl around the corner there, I can't see it. But I could take my pencil, I could check the angle. I could do what's called an angle measurement. And so I can measure that angle, that the angle is about like this, right there. You don't want to do that because that's dimensional. You keep it nice and flat. And you ask yourself, what time is it? And this looked like it was about 10 minutes before the hour. So we're pretty keyed into the hands of a clock, because unfortunately, the time has quite a hold on us, to be sure, in life. So but the good news is for drawing, we can figure out what things are in terms of that. What the angle is by thinking of it in terms of time. So I'm going to go ahead and put the apple on here next. I better finish this first, I guess. So this would be my... Now this is not my final drawing. This is still what we'd call a rough end. Because we want this... we're going to... If we have to make some major changes, and we will, not a big deal, but we want to keep it light. So this is not my final drawing yet. This is still sort of trying to figure it out. So, this is now my box. We have, these lines should be, this, and this should be parallel or parallel-esque, which now it should be pretty close. I think that's opening up though a little bit. Hold on. No, that's fine. Okay, so that's there. This would then be in parallel to these lines. Put me right about there. There's my corner. So here's the top diamond of this cube. And I'm going to send you a picture of this so you guys can draw at home and try to draw. We just want you to do a contour. So I'm going to go ahead and get that finished out. Now, I need to find out where the apple is. Now, what I'll usually do is I'll do X marks the spot, corner to corner, corner to corner, corner to corner, corner to corner. That marks the middle point on the top of that box. And now it's a little easier to either scoot the apple over a little bit or under a little bit, but I've got some information now that now that I've got this point. And the apple's its proportions as tall as it is wide, and it's not quite a full height. So we're going to take this. It's not quite a full height. All right, that's less than a full height. Now, so I'm using some guesstimations, obviously, but they're important. They are intelligent guesstimations. They're not just arbitrarily thrown up there. Or I'm not just eyeballing it, I am trying to do some measuring to help me out. And so by doing this, we're going to go ahead and this should be about as tall as it is wide in terms of the apple. So I can take this and see if it's as tall as it is wide, and it is thereabouts. Yay, all that good stuff. We'll then draw our apple in here, which is basically sort of a modified sphere or a modified circle. So I'll put that circle on there. And for right now, I don't have to worry about getting into that apple until I've got everything else in here. But I'm going to use everything and judge it against this cube. So this cube I've got here, I want to say, hey, how far back is that? If you look over there, And if I use a level line, I can use a level line to check. But if I use a level line, I'll see that the bottle is behind this corner because it's further back. The line that's further closest to the bottom means that's the line that's closer to me. So if this line and this line, this is the one that's further up, that one's the one that's further back. So if I took a level line here from this for this bottle, we'll see that the bottle is sitting back about this far. That's where it starts. And so again, now you can see the thing, but again, I can measure this, the little cube, and we'll see, hey, how many cube heights is that bottle? And so if I take that and I, went ahead and measured it, and then I bring this over. If I bring this over here, that's 1, 1, 2, just under 3. So again, I'm starting here, and I said, well, it's about 3 of these tall. It's just under that, so we'll do 3 of these. That'll be 1, 2. That's 3. Now here's the deal. If this was, I said it's just under, thank goodness, but still, this might be too close to my line. If I wanted to make that smaller, I'd have to shrink my increment of measurement. That would shrink the box, that would shrink the apple, and it would also shrink the bottle. For right now, luckily I've got a piece of paper where I can just go, you know what, I need it bigger. This is now how tall that paper is, and now this little thing doesn't get in the way of that. So let's go ahead and I'm going to see the width of the bottle. If I take a vertical alignment, my pencil vertically, the widest part of the bottle cuts off the little corner of this, and then I'm going to go ahead and say, all right, well, how wide is the bottle based on this increment? How much that increment to the width? And if I took again this little, if I took this increment and I went ahead and measured it, it's about 1 2/3. So if this is the point where the bottle starts, well, then we're going to be 1 2/3 over. So first we'll go 1. So 1 is going to be here. Make sure, double check that. Better to, it's like cutting wood, measure once, measure twice, measure twice, cut once, yeah. Then we're going to measure up about 2/3. That feels to be about 2/3, so we go, okay, something about here. Now again, that's off the page. So if that's an issue, if this is my piece of paper and I want my ball in here, which I probably wouldn't want it touching there, again, I'd have to shrink down my increment of measure. That will shrink everything. So part of this, when I did the layout, I just did a really rough, quick sketch. But what you're supposed to be doing is, do some quick measurements to get a basic idea. Oh, this is 3 times tall as that, that sort of thing. We could have done another quick but a little bit more detailed drawing that would help us more with, because we're getting off because again, that initial rough wasn't proportioned right. So again, I got everything where I wanted, but again, it wasn't proportioned right. So again, if I wanted to make it fit, I'd have to shrink this down, and then this would then shrink, and then this would then shrink, and so forth and so on. So, so again, we come over here, we're 1 2/3. So we came over here, and this is like this, and that's 1, and then that was 2/3. I think that's a little wide, so maybe we'll put it there. But this then is my rectangle. Now I also remeasured my bottle, and it was actually 3, so I went ahead and put it over here. But I think that was a little. So there. This is now my rectangle. Okay, for that bottle. Okay, and it actually is gonna, the rectangle comes over into here. And then we're gonna have the glass. Now, the glass is, we could, because we have enough information here, we could say, hey, well, if I took from here to that bottle, the glass is, and this is the top of the bottle right here. I want to be clear about that. I don't want to be too, I don't want to be non-committal about that. This is the time to commit. It's not like you're a teenager dating or something like that. You want to commit. So we're going to go ahead and commit to the sides. Now that side is actually not in line. This line's not as straight as I had hoped. So we'll straighten it out a bit. Straighten that one out. This one might be out just a scotch. This one is certainly out. That's not... a right angle, so I'll bring that down. That's a little closer. I want to get my head in there. I try to get in here, and all of a sudden I'm leaning into the picture frame or what have you. But so this is way off to my right, so it's a little harder for me to see. I think that'll work. I just tried to lean in there to see this side because I can't see that line very well because it's so far to the right that it's in perspective. But the glass is basically halfway between the top of the bottle and the apple, and so I could just go, hey, that right there should be about the height, right? So I've got enough information now that I can make the glass kind of match to what's happening with the rest of the picture. The glass is also in front of the bottle, and if I take a horizontal line, it slams into just behind the front corner of this. So we're dealing with alignments. We're dealing with horizontal alignments. We can do with vertical alignments. But then I'm going to say, okay, how wide is the glass at the widest point? The widest point of the glass is actually down here because it curves and gets a little fatter down here. So I could take my... Again, I'd be measuring up there the way I showed you, but since I'm using the picture, take this measurement here, check that at the widest part, and again, it's beyond the 3/4 mark. So if I said, all right, well, where does that glass start? If this is the outside of my bottle, the glass actually starts just in from there. Yeah, somewhere right about there. This is then the base of it, because we brought this line over. This is where the glass starts. And we said, all right, well, it's beyond the 3/4 mark. So this right here is beyond the 3/4 mark. And again, it's a guesstimation, but it's not a bad guesstimation. Let me double check. That looks kind of thin to me. That's actually even thicker than what I thought. Hold on a second. Okay, that'll work. Okay, so let's start. This is now I have my rectangles. And my rectangles, again, I can take this and I can start to break these shapes up. So we go, now this is the basic way we've used measuring so that everything is in proportion one to the other. And now we could actually start with getting our center lines. Whenever we draw something, we need it in a center line. That's kind of off there, so I'm going to split the difference between those two lines. I'm going to check to make sure that X is actually in the middle. So I'm going to measure with my thumb and the pencil to the middle, and then measure this from that over to there. Pretty dang close. So again, this would be my center line for the bottle. And now that I've made my decision, that is definitely my center line. Whoops. Alright, kind of got a little wonky down here, so again we're going to straighten this out just a little bit more. Okay, went a little fast with my line, that's what happens. Okay, so, and there's my center line. So again, take this here, drop this down. Now I'm making this center line a little darker than I normally would, but with anything symmetrical we want the center line. Again, with this one, we're going to go ahead and, again, try to really indicate our points. And the okay. Alright, so that's there. This will then come over. That's my corner there. Let's bring this over. If I'm in the way a little bit, I apologize. Let me move back so you can definitely see what we're doing here. Okay. So now, by the way, if I wanted to, I could now actually check to see, because once we got this should be in proportion to this object. We can double check it. We can actually check the object's, basic height, the width. And again, this cup is 1, 2. I went into. Come on. Okay. So if we took this, the width of this thing at the widest part is about 1, 2, and about 1/3. So I could then go, all right, well, let's double check that this is still, if I did this right, well, then this should still have that same proportion. 1, 2, and 1/3. And it was somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2. That's 1, that's 2, and that's beyond the 1/3. Wait, 1, 2. So again, that's a little on the tall side. So that means either it's too tall this way, and I could check that by bringing, again, this kind of is meandering, so bring this over. And I could check from here to the top to see if that's in the middle. Because again, we just guesstimated that. And if it is, well, what that means is that I started, that this width got a little, is off a bit. So if we went ahead and make that a little wider, like so, then we can double check it. Remember, whenever we're doing this, it's really, this is just a help. This isn't, now it's, again, we're close to the 2.5. So I think we can probably, we might be able to, we might be able to go ahead and just add just a tiny bit more. But sometimes when we do this, we kind of get freaked out by, oh, we can't deviate. Well, again, this is just, there's going to be some error in this whenever we do it, but we want it close enough that our brain starts to go, yeah, that'll work. That's about right. And that's all we're looking for. That's all we need. So again, I could take this, get my corner here, my corner here. Once we've got that corner, well, then we can go ahead and do armature of the rectangle. X marks the spot. And then double check that that's in the center this way. It's off, okay? I'm going to go ahead and lean in here just a little bit so I can just see this. So I apologize, it'll be just a second. I'm just measuring with my, again, because I'm measuring in perspective, and I can't really see. This also is supposed to be in halfway this way. Let me use my right hand, I guess, so I can use those too. They're not completely useless. So take that and that to there. That'll work. Okay, so this is now my halfway line this way, and this is my halfway line right about that. Well, hold on a second. Okay. Again, this is so far across from me, it's hard to tell. And the reason I mention that is because sometimes we don't think about that. But if this was in my lap, I could just move this over, so it'd be easier to draw. But if you're extending way across your body, it's going to be much harder to draw. And so again, I've got my little my one here for the bottle. This again, this is a little bit off. Okay. And then we said, I don't know if you remember from the other video, but we said, well, this up here is, the neck is 1/4 of the way down. So if I go from here to that midpoint and here to this midpoint, again, that will mark, the 1/4 point. So that's how long the neck is. The widest part of this thing is 2/3 of the way down. So we can go from here, again, to the midpoint, where the midpoint crosses the main diagonal. That's my 1/3, so this is 1/3, 2/3, and we can check it real quick. That's 1, 2, and 3. That's about 1/3. So again, this is just, I know this bottle enough to do this, but we've done some measuring here on the other video, where these are just points to go, okay, this is where the widest point should be. I could also say, well, the foot, for instance, that foot could be, like almost 2/3. So if it's 2/3, well, this would be 1/3, and we could, you know, bring this over. This would be 1/3, right? So we'd have 1/3. And then we could just take half and add to each side, because that would be, you know, a little bit, half 1/3 on this side, you know, we could put that on there, and then half 1/3 on that side, you know, I mean, we could go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead, I think this will look better. And I'd be shocked if it wasn't actually 3/5 instead of, or, you know, 3/5 instead of 2/3. So this is going to be about 3/5 is what's going to happen here. Okay, so on the cup, this cup, for instance, is just above the halfway point. The foot itself is actually, you know, about 1/8 of the way up, you know, in terms of that. As far as that goes, I could even go, well, let's see, if that was 1/8 of the way up, we go this half, that's 1/4, take that in half, cut this in half. That right there is about, that's right there is about 1/8. And we could go from there. Okay, that's about 1/8 right here. You know, if this is the top of the cup, how much do I see of the ellipse? And this would be the front versus the back of the ellipse. You know, I mean, we can start to get that figured out. Where does the foot, if I drop a vertical line from the side, all straight down, the foot's almost as wide, not quite, but almost as wide as the entire cup. So I'm going to go, okay, let's say this is how wide the foot is. It's just a little bit smaller, not by much at all. I'm going to take this. This is the biggest thing. When people usually draw this, the first thing they do is they make the foot too small. I'm going to measure this to here. And I need to measure to make sure, because it looks like this is out at the bottom. Wow, so something got off. Pardon me. Okay, so, yeah, so, again, this is so far over here that it's hard to see. So I took this to there, and that's where that should be. So I was way out. Just let's double check this real quick. That to there. And I thought this was, they're both off. Well, that's, now that I'm using that, that's now my center line, no matter what. So we're going to start from a place of symmetry. Make sure my center line's actually in the center. I thought I double checked that, but apparently not. And then we'd start drawing. So we could say, all right, well, again, if we said, all right, well, this neck of the bottle, I think I said is like 1/4 of the entire distance. We could take this, divide that in half. We need 1/4 on either side, so that would be 1/8. So we can go, okay, that's 1/4. This, then go ahead and divide that in half. Where that divides that in half, that's going to be just about 1/8. And again, so we can just take that up and we go, okay, well, this is right here, is where that neck's going to start. And then all I need to do is take my thumb and my pencil, measure off the center line, and make sure that's the same distance on either side. And again, that's how we can keep things in more symmetrical. And again, the whole reason we want this box is so that we can see the symmetry happening. All right. So then we can draw this. We can go ahead and go, all right, well, this is going to come down here to the 1/4 point. Then from that 1/4 point, it comes out. Right, and then it comes out through there and it comes down into the foot. Okay, so we can then draw, and let's go ahead and make a commitment, shall we? Okay, so this is that bottle as it comes down onto the foot. Okay, so, and that's all right. Once I do this, if I like that line, we can go ahead and make it symmetrical. Now, what happens normally is when we're drawing this, make sure this is the same distance off of there, and that's the same distance off of there, and that's right about there. All right, this is then going to come off here, and then this is going to go through here, and we're going to end up with something that's going to look about like this. But this, let's say, well, we'll do this in a second, but when we first start drawing, okay, so when we first start drawing, what'll happen a lot is we'll get something like this. It's not really quite symmetrical. This side isn't the same as that side. I'm going to go ahead and indicate the glass, and then we're going to deal with that. I think this glass got way too wide with trying to get it symmetrical, so I'm going to cut this down. Cut that down a little bit, come off of here, cut this down a little bit, that's going to put me back to there. I think I'll be more happy with that for my glass. I'm going to have to change a little bit about the foot down here, but everything else will be the same. So we go ahead and go, alright, well we're going to draw the glass. Okay. And again, we'd go ahead and this would be the glass over here. And then we're going to have this come down for, straight for like the stem. Stem's a little thick, but we'll thin it up later. Make sure we'll thin it up symmetrically off that center line. And then we kind of have this thing flaring out for the foot. Okay? So this is the basic idea of this glass. And from here we could develop this even more. We'd say, well, this has a transition here, and then this gets a little thinner through there, and then this transition flares out through there, right? And then this comes down onto the foot. Now I'm looking for the major minor axis, so we can then make because the minor axis is on the center line. The major axis is the right to left. This should be the same distance as that. This distance here should be the same as that distance over there. So again, I can go ahead and measure it using my thumb and the end of the pencil. As far as that goes. I need to lean in here. Pardon me. Measure this, measure that. Okay, so that's not gonna. And we said, all right. So once we've done this, we can then deal with the symmetry part. Like the symmetry part of this thing is way off, and we've got our ellipse through here. But I'm not going to put the ellipse on until we actually deal with the symmetry. So again, usually I favor my left side because I'm left-handed. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead, try to scoot out of the way, make sure I'm not in your way. But we could then get our one line. So once we've got our one line, okay. So you might say, which one is your one line? You've got 6 lines there. Well, I need to make a decision. But this is now my wine glass. And the hardest thing with this is the curves. So what we do whenever we mirror something, now this is going to be the front of the ellipse, this is going to be the back of the ellipse, so this is going to be where we're going to start this. Should be right in the middle, because that would be where the major axis would be for that ellipse. We're going to go ahead and start, and I'll even have it here too, why not? But we need at least 10 points along this curve so that we can mirror, so at least mirror effectively. So we're going to go, let's say that's 3, 4, 5, maybe we can put one there for 6, 7, 8, and if we have to do more, that's fine, but you want at least between 8 and 10. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we would go ahead and put those little dots on there, and this is for the mirroring side. So we then go ahead and mirror this over. And remember, with mirroring, we need the center lines to mirror. Not the center lines, pardon me. We need straight horizontal lines that divide this, or that hit that at right angles. And if I had to, I'd get out my ruler, because I want them to be as clean and as clear and as, I want them to be correct. So I'd go ahead and put all these lines on, and then we'd measure each one from this side, make sure that side's the same, measure this side of the center line, and then measure that side is the same, and you continue this to get something that's not nice and symmetrical. Here, you do the same thing here. Pick your points along. Now, while it's straight, I don't need to worry too much about it, but once it curves, that's when I need to worry about this. So again, we could go ahead and take these points. By the way, this is how Adobe Illustrator works and vector programs work, and other things like that. But we would then measure, then we take our lines. We need lines that are going straight across here. Not just straight, but they need to be truly perpendicular to that line. And we bring those lines over and all that good stuff. Now, once we mirror, this still needs to be, turned into a bottle. That will be just the flat, that will give you a silhouette. I could do one real quick, I guess. Well, quick is probably not the word to use, but we could go ahead and each time we have to do a new measurement. That to there, and from there to there. This to there, and there to there. This to there. And whoops, and there, right? But we could start. Whoops, that doesn't look like it's on the line, not on the line there. So if I measure it, we don't know where it is. That mark doesn't mean anything. That mark has to come down onto this line. Okay, so that's the important thing. We need it to be on this line that's perpendicular, that comes straight across. So if I've got this mark up here, it's got to come down onto that line. If I've got a mark that's hovering above that one, it's got to come down onto the line, because only on that line is that where it's correct. So again, we would use this, bring this straight across, and then this needs to be down there on the line right there. Okay, and we could do the same thing here. We could start to get the right points for this. Draw this here, and the mirroring one has a better idea of, has a better explanation of what I'm doing here, the mirroring video. But I wanted to show you, okay, we're using that increment measure. We use the sight measure method to lay this out. We then got our rectangles in the proper proportion, and then what we did is we put the rectangles on. We got the center line, tried to draw our objects. And this is still rough. But I'm getting to the point where now we're actually dealing with mirroring, and the mirroring will help bring this into a better bit of symmetry. So there's my dot there. There's my dot there. There's my dot right there. This dot's right there. I didn't make a dot here, but I could add one and make sure that that's in the same place. So I mark this. And then, mark that. So that's that dot there. And again, we could then start to draw this based on those dots. Right, and we can start to get something that's much more symmetrical. Right side to left side. Okay, and we could just continue on down through through this drawing. So that's how that works. Something about like that. And again, we just keep doing that all the way down through. And then once we've got the thing mirrored, well, then we just put the ellipses on there, finish it up, do our finished line work. And that's where we're really like, okay, all this other stuff was just getting to the point where we could come over here and actually bring in a beautiful line and start to describe, nice flowing lines onto this. So this is just a real, shows you sort of how to lay this out and what to do with it. And then from there we could, again, clean these lines up, draw our apple. Our apple would come in here, right? Put the little pucker in here. This is where it's turning, that the little, you got the little stem coming back into saddest looking stent I've ever seen. But anyways, we we clean the stent up, no big deal. And that's the thing. Don't get too stressed. I'm like, it's sad, but I'm just like, I can make it look good. That's okay. Don't be afraid to go, this isn't doing what I want. Well, the more you draw, the more you're like, I'll just do this. It'll be fine. No big deal. And that's a really good attitude you want to have. Is you don't want to feel like, oh no, just because it didn't work out that somehow it's the end of things. It's really not. So I want you to take this approach. I want you to try to do a drawing for me using the mirroring. I want you to use center lines. I want you to use armature of a rectangle. I want you to use sight measure method. I want you to try to make a drawing for me as accurate as possible. All right, you folks take care, and I'll see you. Stay creative. Bye-bye.